Good to see everybody tonight. Um, got lots of people from all over the country. Got some people from Charleston, South Carolina. Got Denver, California, Atlanta, Phoenix, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Jacksonville, Florida. I'll actually be in Jacksonville, Florida later this month. Going to be doing a family trip there for my kids' spring break. And so if you're in Jacksonville, Florida, I'm also going to be hosting a 1 hour workshop while I'm there. So if you're interested in that, go to the meetup.com and look up our Multifamily Investor Nation meetup page there, and you'll see that it's already been listed there. So would love to be able to meet anybody that might be out there. Let's see who else. I got Memphis, Tennessee, got Charlotte, North Carolina. All right, that's awesome. That's great. Tamika, good. Hopefully we can meet you out there, Tamika. Look forward to that. I got some Austin, Texas people. I actually will be in Austin, not this month, but next month, and I'll be doing the same thing, doing a 1 hour workshop while I'm there. So make sure you check out the meetup page for Austin, Texas, as well for the Multifamily Investor Nation. All right, so let me go ahead and go. I want to talk about a few things first. So first off, as a few more people are coming in, I wanted to let you guys know that I will be I'm going to go through several different strategies that you can use to be able to raise private capital. I'm going to start off tonight by talking a little bit more about what I call the investor triad. And so yesterday we did a masterclass called the Investor Relations Masterclass. It was a 3 hour masterclass. It was a jam-packed session, 3 hours long is where we did that. And it was a virtual session, and we talked about this investor triad. And I think it's very important to understand it when you're going out and trying to raise capital. So we're going to talk about that first before we get started. And then at the very end, I'm going to talk about a strategy that I'm going to be testing that I have not used yet, but I'm going to be using it and testing it. And I think it's going to provide some pretty cool results and pretty phenomenal results as it relates to raising capital. So I'm going to share that with you, so you kind of know what I'm going to be trying and what I'm going to be doing. And then I'm also going to share with you something that I know somebody else is trying, and we're kind of still trying to see how the results are going to go with it. But so there's two little like bonuses, if you will, that of raising capital I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. So hopefully you guys stay all the way through to the very end. It'll probably be around 30 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have some questions and answers at the end as well. When you go, I want you to first be familiar with the chat box there. If you see when you type in the chat box, you'll see a little button, a little round circle to the right of your name. So if you have a question throughout tonight, you can just click that little round circle, and that'll let me know that it's a question, so that I can make sure that I answer all the questions, as many of the questions as I can throughout. And if you have questions, or if you have comments, or just some dialogue you want to have back and forth with the other people on the webinar tonight, you can certainly use that chat box for that. But I'll also be looking for those red dots for the questions as we open it up for questions and answers towards the end. All right, so let's go to this next slide here just to introduce, for those of you who don't know who I am. I'm Dan Handford, key principal and partner of a company called PassiveInvesting.com. And we are a multifamily national investment firm. So if you're interested in joining alongside us and doing some passive investing with us, you can join us. Just go to PassiveInvesting.com. There's a form there that you can fill out that'll allow you to join us and jump on a phone call with me personally, so we can see if you'll be a good fit for our group and some of the deals that we're putting together. I'm the owner of 5 specialty medical clinics here in South Carolina. I also have investments in 125 million plus worth of multifamily real estate, consisting of a little over 1,300 doors, and looking to do another $100 million in acquisitions this year. And I'm also the founder of the Multifamily Investor Nation, which is this group, and that's probably how you heard about this webinar tonight. And I'm also, along with my wife, the co-host of the Tough Decisions for Entrepreneurs podcast. So that podcast is different than our multifamily podcast, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But the Tough Decisions podcast is where we interview entrepreneurs from around the world about the tough decisions that they've had to make in business, and how they were able to overcome some of those tough decisions, whether they had good outcomes or bad outcomes, and all the lessons that they learned in between. So it's a daily podcast, and it'd be one that I would highly encourage you to do. Right now, we have 47 people, it looks like, that are on with us on the webinar. And one thing that I'm trying to do this month is we just launched our Multifamily Investor Nation podcast. And so if you would do me a favor right now and just pull out your cell phone, whether it be an iPhone or Android or whatever it is, and do me a favor. I want you to open up your podcast app. And one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to get to 100 ratings or reviews this month alone. So right now, I think earlier today we had like 12, or maybe yesterday had like 12. Now we're at 17. And so we're trying to get to 100 reviews on the iTunes platform, as well as trying to get them on the Spotify and Stitcher platforms as well. And what you can do is, let me share one of my screens here with you so you can kind of see what the actual podcast looks like. Here it is. There it is. So here is what the podcast looks like. You can kind of see the logo here. This is the logo for the podcast. So right now you can see we have 17 reviews here. We're trying to get that to 100. So it's going to definitely help us out quite a bit. Obviously, I'm not charging you guys for a lot of these weekly webinars, trying to provide as much value as possible. This podcast, though, if you're interested in multifamily, is a phenomenal podcast to be able to subscribe to. And we actually interview multifamily investing syndicators and investors that are putting deals together and actually closing deals. So you can't be on this podcast unless you've actually closed a deal. But when you come on the podcast, we dive deep into how you found the deal, how investors are raising the capital, how long it took them to raise the capital, working with lenders and the brokers and those attorneys and closing the deal, and the SEC attorneys and all the stuff that goes in together and to putting the deal together and getting it across the finish line at closing, and then what I call the commencement line, because it's really a beginning stage of the actual deal itself. So we even talk about some post-closing items as well. We launched this thing in January of this year, January 2019. We've already released 7 episodes. So every week we're going to be releasing a different episode. And I'm telling you right now, the ones that I've already done are going to be great. They are great. They are phenomenal. The ones that I'm going to be releasing soon will be even better, because the more and more of these we do, the more powerful they get. So if you would do me a favor right now, pull out your iPhone. If you're on the iPhone platform, you can swipe down and just type in podcast. If you're not familiar with the podcast app, it's a little purple icon. And open up that purple icon there, and then type in Multifamily Investor Nation. And then you will see this icon right here will actually pop up. When you click on it, you can click subscribe, and then you can also click rate or review the actual podcast. So I'd love for you to be able to rate us and review us. If you're on an Android platform, you can do the same thing. You can open up the Stitcher the Stitcher app or the Spotify app and do the same thing. Just search Multifamily Investor Nation, and you will see that this icon right here will be there. Do the same thing, click on it, subscribe, and then rate or review us, and that'll help us out quite a bit. All right, so just wanted to share that little tidbit with you there. If you would help us out, help me out, if you will, and give us a rating there, give us a review. It would really help promote the show on the platforms that are with iTunes and Android that are displaying the podcast. So that would be very helpful. And let's see. Oh, I wanted to introduce you to my family here. So for those of you who have not heard of me before, obviously now I've done a little bit of an intro for you. And this is also some pictures of my family. I'm married there with my wife there, Danae. We have 4 little children. Caroline, who is 8 years old. Caleb, who is 6 years old. Chloe, who is 2 years old, 2.5 now. And then Callie, who just turned 1 year old back in January. So got a busy life, busy family, and looking forward to continue to see them grow as well as we continue to grow our multifamily business and the other business entities that we're a part of. Oh, and one thing before I forget that I wanted to mention to you before I start diving into the next slide, which is going to be about the investor triad that I mentioned earlier. One of the things that I want to make sure I don't forget to tell you about is our multifamily mastermind. This multifamily mastermind is a select group of people. You do have to apply to be a part of it, and we're not. It's not for everybody. So this is for people who are playing on a high level or want to play on a high level and surround themselves with people in a room that are better than them. And so we're cultivating this group. We're bringing a lot of high level people into this group. And so if you're interested in that mastermind, I will tell you that it is $15,000 a year. So just know that up front. I tell you that up front so you don't waste your time if you're not interested in that or can't afford that. We don't do monthly payment plans, so you have to pay that up front. So it's $15,000 a year, and I will give you a link right here that'll show up on your screen that will allow you to click on it and apply for this. So it's a very simple form, 4 or 5 different things we want to get from you, and then we'll jump on a call with you and discuss it further to see if it's something that might be a good fit for you. So if you're interested in that, feel free to click that button, apply now, and just be aware that of the cost as well, because it is a very high level program. And I personally am a part of very high level programs, not multifamily, only multifamily, but and even and masterminds outside of multifamily. So right now I'm in a $30,000 a year mastermind that I pay for that has been phenomenal. It has been an amazing experience, and every year I try to find a different high level mastermind to be a part of, to be able to surround myself with people who are bigger and better and greater than me, that they can pull me up instead of always being around in a room where I might be the smartest person in the room. Not that I'm saying that I'm always the smartest person, but that there's that phrase of if you're always the smartest person in the room, you need to find a different room to be a part of. It doesn't mean you can't be a part of those other rooms that you're the smartest person, because those people need to be pulled up as well to be able to gain your knowledge, which is one of the reasons why I like to teach. I like to educate. I like to give my knowledge back to people so that they understand where they need to go and various avenues as well. So if you're interested in that, you can click on that. And let's see here, go back to my slide presentation. So let's talk about the investor triad. So the investor triad is something that you have to understand in order to know whether or not an investor is going to invest with you. So let me draw this out for you real quick and see if this will be see if I can get this to be helpful for you. So here is going to be a little bit more fancy today than I was yesterday. Going to figure out how I can do this for those of you who might have been on the master class. All right, so we have this triangle here, okay? And there's 3 things that every investor must align with in order to invest with you. They have to know you, right? So they have to know you first. This thing is not working. Let's see. One second. I'm just going to draw on this thing. Makes it much easier. There we go. All right. So they have to know you, right? And then they have to also like you, and then they also have to trust you. So they have to know, like, and trust you. So before I dive any deeper on this, I want you guys to find the chat box again, and I want you to tell me that I want you to tell me what of these 3 do you think is the most important? Do you think, type in number 1 into the chat box if you think it's important for them to know you, if you think it's important for people to like you, or if you think it's important for people to trust you. So type into the chat box right now and let me know what you're thinking. Do you think it's more important for someone to know you, like you, or trust you on this investor triad? So type it out there. We got trust, no, trust. Okay. Okay. All 3 but number 2, 1, and 3. DB knows no. DB has 1. Okay. Got 3. Okay. I'm gonna blow your guys's. I'm gonna blow your mind off a little bit here, because of what I'm gonna tell you. So this webinar is all about raising private capital, right? And so in order for somebody to be able to invest with you, they have to know, like, and trust you. But the problem is that there is, so here's what I'll tell you. I'll tell you that the number 1 thing on this triad is for people to know you. And the reason why is because if they don't know you, they don't even have the opportunity to be able to like or trust you. So you have to make sure that people know you. And how do you do that? That's about creating awareness, getting attention, being able to be able to put yourself in positions where people can start to know you. And that way you can start to build up that trust. Most people go through the process, like they usually go through a process of they will first know you, and then they eventually get to the point of liking you and then trusting you. These two kind of get built up at the same time, but in order for these two things to happen, they have to know you first. So they have to know you first, and then they typically start to like you, and then they start to build that trust in you as well. Now, of these three things, the most important is for them to trust you, but the most important thing to do first is for them to know you. So you want to make sure that they can know you, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Getting into a position where they can actually start to know you. They can actually start to know you. So keep that in your mind, that they can't like or trust you unless they know you. So you got to get out there, and you have to be networking, and you have to be getting in front of people so they can actually start to actually know you. So one of the first things that I will tell you about raising capital is that you should reach out to your existing network of friends and family. Okay. Now, you might have already heard this before, and that's another thing too, is all the stuff that I'm covering today, there's going to be probably bits and pieces of it that you've heard, but I want you to try to stay throughout the entire piece to kind of find that one or two, golden nuggets that you can kind of pull out that you might not have ever even heard of before. But one of the things that you can do with your friends and family is reach out to each one of them and not necessarily ask them to invest with you, but start a conversation with them and say, hey, this is what I'm doing now. Let me tell you what I'm getting, what I'm involved with. And do you know anybody that may be interested in investing minimum $50,000 onto our multifamily projects that we're putting together that have annualized returns of between 12 to 15% or somewhere around in there? And that way they kind of understand, okay, you're doing multifamily, you're doing investing, and if they have money or they want to invest, they might say that, but you're asking in a kind of a passive way of, hey, do you know anybody who may be interested in that? And you never know. They might say, oh, I have so-and-so that I know that is really involved in that kind of stuff and would really like to be able to do that. So don't discount any of your friends or family in doing that. I have not. I'm trying to think here. Be careful. No, I have not had any of my family per se invest in any of my projects, but I've had several friends that have invested in the projects that we put together, and they've even brought in other people that are in their circles that they brought to me to be able to invest in some of our projects too. So don't discount your family and friends as well. You can also start your own authority platform, whether that be, starting a meetup. You can go in and go to meetup.com and start a meetup. If you're interested with our Multifamily and Investor Nation group, you can help us and be one of our co-organizers and kind of be the go-to person in your market. If you're interested in doing something like that, you can always shoot me over an email, dan@multifamilyinvestornation.com. It's perfectly fine if you'd like to do something like that. And would love to have a conversation with you about it. So having a meetup allows you to be able to surround yourself with people. Now, I will say that one of the things that, well, I'll cover that topic in a couple of slides, because in a couple of slides I'm going to share with you one additional tip that I've used that allows me to be able to raise capital and find investors in a different way. So stay tuned. In a few slides here, I'll go over that. You could also author blogs and books and various things like that to put yourself in that authority position. I know somebody recently, James Kondasamy, just wrote a book called Passive Investing for the Commercial Real Estate Investor, or something. That was the title, something like that. Well, guess what that does? That immediately gives him awareness that allows him to start that investor triad of people knowing him, and puts him immediately in that authority platform. And so with this day and age, being able to write a book is very easy. You could be a self-published author. You can go to some of these speak your book programs, and within one day you can speak your entire book. they're not cheap, but you can definitely do that where you can speak your book and get it published faster than somebody else might be able to do it. You can start to write blogs and PR articles and start to be active on a lot of these Facebook groups and producing, some value for other people. Start your own YouTube channel, do something like that. What I've done is I've started the Multifamily Investor Nation. I do a virtual event twice a year, bringing in high-level speakers from the entire industry. We did one or not last month. This is now March 2019. So in January 2019, we did our very first virtual summit called the Multifamily Investor Nation Summit. Had over 500 people. It was 586 people that were attending that attended that. And we have another one. We had over 60 speakers. We have another one for June of 2019. So if you're interested in that, you can go to mfinsummit.com and check it out and register for that next summit. So, we have right now over 200 people that are already registered for that summit coming up in June. And this month, we're actually going to be finalizing the speakers that we're going to be having for that event. But it's going to be another great event, but it allows me to get that awareness, to get people to start that triad of people knowing me, right? And I'm also giving other people a platform for them to be able to be known by other people by creating the platform that other speakers can now be a part of. And those speakers are now getting into that position of being able to have people know them. You could also start your own podcast. So I have a podcast. I have two of them actually, but podcasting is very simple to be able to get started. And so a lot of you might be thinking, well, how do I get a podcast started? So I do have a question actually. So in the chat box here, how many of you have ever thought of starting a podcast? But you have not done it yet. So type in yes, 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 yes if you have thought about starting a podcast. So I'm just curious as to how many people have thought about it, but maybe just haven't taken that leap yet. And maybe it's because you don't know for sure maybe how to do it or the best way to do it or various things like that. So you've thought about doing a podcast, and would it be helpful if I did a instead of saying yes, maybe say for sure on this next one, so I know who it is. But have any of you ever thought about doing a podcast, but you haven't done it yet because maybe you're not really sure how to do it? And maybe that would be a good opportunity for us to do maybe some content or a webinar or some sort of program to teach you how to actually start a podcast. I thought about what I want to focus. So Samit says, I've thought about it, but I want to focus on finding high quality off-market deals first. And that's a good point, Samit, that you want to be able to start to, be able to find those high quality off-market deals. But the problem is that you always have to be, you also have to be finding investors all the time. You can just like deals, you can't stop looking for deals and you can't stop looking for investors. And so you need to be doing both of them at the same time. So, all right. So it looks like DB is getting ready to launch one. So that's kind of cool. Let's see here. Rebecca, for sure. Both Rebecca's on here for sure. Great. Awesome. Well, that might be something we'll do down the road in the future. So stay tuned for that. I've thought about it for a little while and just haven't actually done it yet, but be glad to maybe even do like a 3-hour, another 3-hour masterclass or something like that on the weekend that, really kind of goes into it a little bit more would be very helpful. So next thing here, you can volunteer and be a board member at local clubs and charity organizations and various things like that. A lot of times there are high net worth individuals and board members that are a part of those groups that attorneys and physicians and various things like that, and that have high net worth that you can build relationships with them. And that's one of the key things about this raising capital is that it is a relationship business, right? So you are trying to build relationships with other people. And so one of the best ways to do that is just to go where they are, volunteer in different on different boards and sit on the seats beside them and start conversations with them. It's not going to be one of those things where you're going to meet them one time and just all of a sudden go up to them and say, hey, would you invest in my deals, right? they need to know you, but they also have to like and trust you, and that comes with time. And so to be able to do that, you have to be able to build that up over time as well. But just remember that it's a it's a relationship business. It's you have to know people, or they have to really know you, right? To be able to start that investor triad. So charities and nonprofits, volunteer for local charities and nonprofits. You can obviously sit on their boards and volunteer on their boards. That's definitely one thing, but you can also be a part of them. Maybe even starting some fundraisers for those groups and getting involved with some of those people, and starting some conversations with some high net worth individuals to be able to raise some capital for those charities and nonprofits. And then you start to find other people that are investing large monies, donating large amounts of money to these groups, and you can start conversations with them about some of the opportunities that you're doing and various things like that. One of the things that I do when I try to network with other people, especially with strangers, is and I say strangers, just if I go to a multifamily event, or I go to some other event that I'm trying to talk to other people and raise money for. I'm trying to raise money for myself. Obviously, I'm trying to find those new investors. Is I always try to find a way to add value to them. So when I start a conversation, I want to say, hey, what are you doing? How can I help you? And in turn, they're going to immediately ask me, a little bit more about me and what I'm doing and how they can benefit me. And so it's kind of a give and take. There's a book that I would recommend to each one of you to read called Influence, which is by an author by the name of Robert Cialdini. Influence by Robert Cialdini. He wrote this book, and it's probably my favorite. Not probably, it is my favorite marketing book. But it talks about different types of rules of economics and social psychology, and like rules of reciprocity and various things like that. And I would highly encourage you to take a look at that book and read it, because it has definitely helped me and being able to communicate with other people, as well as even write copy when I'm trying to write copy to be able to put things together from a sales perspective. So here is one of the unique things that I will tell you. There's a group called Club Core. This is one group out of probably half a dozen different groups across the country, maybe even more than that, that are exclusive executive private clubs. And these are member-only clubs, and you have to be. It's a member invite-only club. But this one that I'm a part of, which is here in Columbia, South Carolina, they have over 300 affiliate groups across the country, whether it be golf clubs or high rises that have restaurants on the top of them. But they are exclusive private clubs, and you do have to pay a monthly or yearly dues to be a part of it. They're not usually that expensive. I mean, they're usually maybe a couple $100 a month, somewhere around in there. But it allows you to have access to high net worth individuals, and you can start to go to some of their networking events and rub shoulders with these doctors and lawyers and congressmen and engineers and accountants and these high net worth individuals that are part of these special exclusive clubs. So I'm a part of this one called Club Core here in Columbia, South Carolina. They're all over the country. If you're interested in this group, check them out. Just go to clubcore.com, and in this clubcore.com, when you apply, I'd be glad to be one of your sponsors. So you can always list me down there, Dan Handford, as your name, as a name for a referral or a stamp as a sponsor. I don't think I get anything for that, so don't think I'm trying to do it to get anything from it. But even if I provided this value to you, who cares if I got a little kickback of $50 or whatever it is, or a free month membership? I don't know what it is, but anyway, so it's clubcore.com, and this is where they usually have weekly meetings where they have like wine and cheese tastings and various things like that, and you can really start to rub shoulders with people and put yourself in environments. And that was really what the main thing I wanted to talk about was the main things that that you should think of when you're trying to find places to go network and find high net worth individuals. So when you go to local meetups or local RIA clubs, a lot of times you think, oh, that's where all the high net worth individuals are. These investors that have lots of money, that's where they're going. Wrong. If any of you have ever been to those meetups, most of the people in the room are doing the same thing you're doing. They're trying to find deals. They're trying to find, high net worth individuals, trying to find capital. And usually what happens is when a high net worth individual comes in that has money to invest, it's like a fat rat on a Cheeto, right? They're all trying to pounce on that one guy or that one gal to try to have them invest in some of their projects or get to know them a little bit more. And so what you need to do is just try to find rooms where you can have the opposite effect, where you're not the only one in the room, where you are the only one in the room that is trying to find that capital. So in the RIA clubs and the meetups, it's the opposite. There are, most of the people in those groups are trying to find one thing, and it's that capital and building those relationships. And so it takes a lot more effort to be able to find it in those places where you might be able to just go into other environments. Like one thing that I do that has been quite effective is I go and speak to other groups around that are high net worth individuals. Like I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, I told you, in April, and it's because I was invited to speak to a group of physicians. There'll probably be 150 to 200 physicians in that group, and in that audience, and they invited me to speak on marketing. But when I start to teach them about how to market their practices and how to do that kind of stuff, I'll usually show a picture or a slide of an apartment complex and kind of tell them a little bit about, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the apartment investing stuff that we do. And I'll usually have half a dozen to a dozen physicians afterwards come up to me and want to invest in some of our projects. So that's something that I would highly encourage you to do, is just to try to find events that you can maybe get in front of people to be able to teach on something that you're knowledgeable about. So kind of think about that. What are some things that you can provide value on? And they pay me a small amount to speak at that event, but it's not much. I usually donate it back to that group because it's a nonprofit medical organization. I usually just donate it back to that organization, and just so that I want them to realize that I'm not there for the speaking fee. I'm there to be able to provide value and give back, but also, hey, if some of your groups or your members are interested in investing with us, I'd love that as well. And whenever I donate my speaking feedback, it also allows me to get invited back the next time to speak. And some of those groups I want to get invited back to, so I make sure that I donate my speaking fee back to them. So that's another cool strategy to be able to use to be able to speak in front of those types of groups. And a couple of I think I have like 2 or 3 more slides left here, and then I'll open it up for questions. So you want one of the most lowest hanging fruits is, if you've done projects in the past, ask your current investors for referrals. Ask them to send you people that might be in their sphere of influence that may be interested in investing in these types of projects. So ask for referrals. Referrals will sometimes come organically, but if you start to ask for them, they will come a lot more. And that's a lot of times where a lot of your lower hanging fruit is. And I can almost guarantee you that if you start to ask for referrals from people you've already raised money from, you will start to find more and more people that are around them that they know that will be an invest. And when they refer you, they have built-in trust. So now they immediately know you, and they immediately know you, but they also will immediately have that trust built into you, and they'll start to like you right away. And the reason why is because their friend likes you and their friend trusts you. So it's inherent credibility that accelerates and puts fire on that investor triad that we talked about earlier. And then finally here, a lot of times when we have deals to put together, we're trying to raise capital. We sometimes feel frustrated because we might send out an investor packet and say, hey, we have this project. It's 220 units, and it's located in this city and whatever. And we send out an email to our database of investors, and we hear crickets, right? Or we have very few people that actually reach out that maybe are interested. And so one of the most important things you can do is pick up that phone and make the phone call. Because I can't tell you how many times I've called an investor, we've had a project together, and I said, hey, I just want to call and follow up with you to kind of, I don't tell them, hey, do you want to invest? I just call and say, hey, just wanted to call and see if you had received that email on XYZ project, and wanted to see about getting your feedback on it. I just want feedback from them. And almost every time that I've gotten feedback from them, they've been like, oh yeah, I thought I actually was interested in investing with that. And they give me either a reason why they couldn't because of certain financial things, or I've had people say, oh, I'm so glad you called. I just got busy with business or life or whatever and just never replied. Is there still room for me to get in? And then I get them to be able to invest. So don't discount the ability to just make that phone call to be able to raise money. So right now, I'm going to be answering some questions that you guys might have along the way from this. So if you have some questions, go ahead and throw them out there. There's two things that I was going to go over with you that I told you that I would do, and that was about earlier that we're going to be testing. We haven't started doing yet, but we're going to be testing it. One thing that there's two things. One, I'm not testing it, but I know somebody that is testing this. I talked to him yesterday about it. He was actually in our master class that we did, and the one thing that he is doing is he is taking some of the various like podcasts and different content and maybe even some of the things that he's written, and he is starting to promote them on Facebook with some people locally in his community that might be physicians and lawyers and in a demographic that would be able to invest in some of his projects. So the verdict's still out as to how well it's going to work, but he's doing some Facebook, Instagram ads to some of those people to see if he can maybe get some of those people to raise their hand to be able to do some stuff with them. So that's one idea that I had for you that we're still in the testing phases of. And the last thing that I'll tell you as far as the testing that we're doing is we are doing some in-person, like live networking dinners and lunches with our current investor database. And what we're doing is as I travel around, like right now, I mean, my travel schedule is quite crazy over the next probably 2.5 months. I'm going to be traveling. Just pull my calendar up here. So I just got back from Denver and San Diego, and then later this month I'll be going to Jacksonville, Florida, and then I fly from Jacksonville to Dallas, Texas, and then I go from Dallas, Texas. The following weekend I'll be going to Austin, Texas, and then going straight from Austin to Beverly Hills, California, and the LA market there, and then I'll be flying up to the San Jose and San Francisco market for a one-day trip, and then I'll be flying back to Colombia. And then a couple weeks later, I'll be going to Las Vegas, doing an event out in Las Vegas there, and then going to be going to Hawaii in May. That's going to be a vacation time for my wife and I, but we will also be doing some events out there as well to be able to increase that. So I'm also going to be hosting one of our mastermind retreats in Las Vegas. I mean, in Hawaii while we are there. And so for those of you who have thought about maybe joining our mastermind, that's one of the things that we're going to be doing is doing some of these masterminds in some really cool places. And so the first one, not the first one, but one of the ones we're going to be doing is going to be in Hawaii. So if you are interested in that, again, there's the button for you to be able to apply for it. That I have a busy travel schedule. So as I'm traveling, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be bringing people my current investor database and saying, hey, thank you for investing in this deal. Would you also be interested? I'm going to be in your area XYZ date. Would you be interested in coming to dinner with me? My treat. But I'd also like for you to bring one of your other friends with you, or a couple of friends with you that may be interested in these types of projects, and so that I can have them start to build in that referral network, and that as I'm traveling around and just hosting these different dinners at local restaurants, and making sure that these restaurants that you choose to do them in, they're nice, fancy restaurants. You don't want to do it at McDonald's. You don't want to do it at a more of a chain restaurant. Obviously, I usually do them at like Del Frisco's Double Eagle. It's a really nice, fancy. They have closed rooms. They're usually really nice restaurants, great steak and seafood and various things like that. They're usually they're all over the place, but they're very, very nice. They have they actually even have meeting rooms inside of them that are exclusive, so they can close them off, and you can also have discussions and presentations to that group as well. So that's one of the things I'm working on and I'm testing, and so I'll give you guys feedback on how that's doing. But I can't see how it wouldn't work, right? You get a room full of people that have invested with you, with people who have not invested with you, and they all start to talk, and that helps to continue to build up that investor triad of people knowing you, and then eventually for them to also like and trust you. And they immediately like you when you invite them to dinner, right? They invite you to dinner and have them and like you because you're paying for dinner. So, all right, so let's open it up for questions here, questions and answers. Got a few minutes here for some questions. I know this is the content tonight was there's probably not too many questions, but as a final wrap up, as these questions are coming in, don't forget to give us a review on our podcast. We really appreciate that. Multifamily Investor Nation. All right, so here's a question from Rama. Do you ask any soft commitments when you meet investors before you have any deal? No, we do not. So we basically let them know what the minimum investment is, and we will tell them that we usually tell them the process of how we actually get soft commitments and when they can submit their soft commitment. But we don't usually get any soft commitments until we actually have a project or a deal. Next question is from Tiara. What is a good percentage to have personally invested before seeking out an investor? I think it depends on the project and depends on the deal. So, our group is investing in, large, multifamily assets, minimum 10 million purchase, minimum 100 units or more. And so the equity that we're raising is usually in the millions. And so we are usually putting in between 5 to 10% of the capital in order to invest alongside of our investors. So I think that's a great number to be able to have invested alongside of. If it's a smaller deal, obviously that might change. That might be a little bit different. So I think it just depends on the deal. PI. Okay, so Rob is asking about, he said, I have successfully secured private investment for my single family flips. How do I transition to securing investors for long-term financing like multifamily props? So when you're trying to find private investment for your single family flips, they're basically financing the entire deal. And so what you have to do is you have to start to talk to some of those people who have been financing it, and because those people are usually on the debt side. And so we typically will have our investors on the equity side, and so they're not giving us a loan, they're actually investing alongside us, and our investments are usually anywhere between 5 to 7 years as far as the hold period. And it's obviously all about talking and having that conversation with them. So one of the easiest ways, though, Rob, to be able to start to have that conversation and talk to people is to start to find other groups that you can raise capital for. So I'm going to be doing a webinar coming up soon on how to raise capital for other groups. And so stay tuned for that one. Make sure you keep an eye out for that one, because it'll open that up a little bit more as well. Angel's asking, how do I put some sample investor marketing packages together? Is there a program you can recommend? So one of the easiest things that you can do, if you just go and just Google multifamily pitch deck or something like that, or even on some of the groups, there's some pitch decks, and heck, I don't care. I'll give you a copy of mine if you'd like to kind of see what we put together as far as our pitch deck to the investors for potential investors. One of the things that you can do is if you have not put a deal together yet, you can put together a sample deal, so that in that sample deal package you have a deal that you can show and say, hey, this is an example of a deal that you might see. But again, I think the first thing you should do before you get started doing your own deals is raise money for other deals, because that's where you're going to get that experience of talking to other people. That's where you can leverage their experience on raising more money. So Jeff is asking, so have you raised money without meeting anyone in person? You stated you were doing a lot of traveling. I'm curious if these are people you have met in person. So I will say that I have a lot of people that I have not met in person that I maybe meet on a webinar like this, that they know me now, they like me and trust me. We jump on a phone call, have a conversation, and start that dialogue, and they have invested with me that I have not met them in person. But I think it's very important to try to go out of your way to meet your investors in person. It just solidifies the relationship. But I will say the majority of our investors I have met And I've always been surprised at how many people I meet one time at an event. Like, this past weekend I was in Denver at the Best Ever conference, met some people there, shook their hand. They said they're passive investors and want to invest, and they'll probably invest in some of my future projects. I was at this past year, I was at the Ultimate Partnering event in Boston and met an investor there. And like 2 months later, we had an offering that went out, and he invested in that one. And then a month later, we had another offering went out. He invested in that one. And so I met him one time, and he was able to know me, like me, and trust me very quickly to be able to invest alongside of us. So that's a good point about that. Right now, Rebecca is asking about what markets does our group focus on. Our group right now is focused in the southeastern markets, so in the Carolinas pretty heavily, and then Atlanta, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida. We like Orlando, and then even in some of the Texas markets we're in as well. Rashad is asking, do you prefer a 506C or a 506B? Our group right now has only done 506Bs, where we are, so you can't market it, so you have to have family, friends, people you have an prior existing relationship with, and so we are doing the 506B. We typically have a minimum investment of $50,000. We are considering, though, on one of our future offerings of doing a 506C, which allows us to only accept investments from accredited investors, but allows us to be able to market it. And for those of you who might not be familiar with what the differences between like a Regulation A, Regulation D, or those 506C and 506Bs, we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on that, and it's actually been loaded up on our YouTube channel. So if you just go to youtube.com and search for Multifamily Investor Nation, you will find that that webinar in the playlist for our prior webinars there, going into some of the SEC regulations and various things like that. So Colby is asking, what type of lenders are you utilizing for senior debt financing? So we typically use we typically use the permanent agency financing with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. But if the deal is warrants it, then we will also consider doing a bridge loan. Although the bridge loans right now are a little bit risky because of the unknowns of the market, but we have done one of those recently as well. Do you only work with qualified investors? If not, how do you comply with SEC? So yes, you do have to be a qualified investor to be able to invest in our syndications. And again, I would refer you back to that webinar we did recently, but a qualified investor is really either an accredited investor or a sophisticated investor. And the accredited investor is somebody who has a minimum net worth of $1 million, or they have annual income for the last 2 years of $200,000 if they're single, $300,000 if they're married, and they expect it to continue. That's your accredited investor. The next one is the other one is the sophisticated investor. The sophisticated investor is a investor who is non-accredited, but they have the ability to make financial decisions, and they have that extra expertise in accounting or finance or whatever, or they have a CPA that has recommended it, or various things. There's several different nuances with the SEC that you have to comply with. And so I would definitely refer you back to that webinar that we did. We even had an SEC attorney come and join us on that one as well. How do we determine how much I will be comfortable raising? Is it 1 million or 2 million? I don't want to go under contract without having my ducks in a row. So that's a good question. So, Rama, I think one of the best things that you can do is obviously knowing from your prior deals how much you've been able to raise, and then so you kind of have that number in place, and then talking with other groups that may be interested in capital raising for you, and then kind of getting a number from them to be able to know. But that is definitely a tricky position to be in, is to not really know for sure how much you can raise. And that's why I always think it's important for somebody to try to raise for other groups first, so they can kind of have a ballpark number of how much they feel comfortable being able to raise, or at least being able to have somebody along in their back pocket where if they think they can raise 2 million and they can only raise 1 million, that they can call on and say, hey, I need another $1 million. Can your investors bring that, and be able to have that connection in those networks. But that's definitely a tricky position to be in. Rebecca, when you were, I just lost it. Let me try not to hear. Yeah, so Rebecca's asking, when you were starting out, did you ever partner with other capital raising teams to raise funds? So in the beginning, when I first started out, I was that capital partner, and I was raising for other groups. And in some of the deals that we've done recently, we have had one group well, two different groups, but one group in each one of these deals that helped us raise some capital. So I do recommend trying to network with other capital raising partners and teams to be able to help you out, because you never know when you're going to be able, when you might need to be able to use them to be able to raise capital for you. And in our masterclass we did yesterday, we actually talked about, as a syndicator, how to work with capital raising partners. So stay tuned for that one. If you weren't a part of it, we'll be putting together the program for that masterclass in a couple of weeks, so you'll be able to buy a copy, if you will, of that masterclass. Then once we put it together, we do, Rick, have Class B or C properties. We do B and C, mostly C plus and B products that we use. And what Jason's asking, what requires an SEC filing for multifamily investing? Is there a capital raise number? It doesn't have to do with the amount of money that you're raising. It has to do with the relationship of the people who are investing and the relationship with the GP, and whether or not they're going to be actually performing anything with the GP. And there's a couple other things too. And there's definitely, obviously, if you have, once you start to get over about 5 investors, that's really when you're going to start to probably need to start to talk to an SEC attorney. But that's not the only hard and fast rule. And again, I'm not an attorney, so don't take my word for it. But I will refer you to that webinar we did again that talks about that, because we did have that question come up about, what is it? When do you do a JV, and when do you do an actual syndication, where you actually have to file paperwork with the SEC and various things like that. Sounds scary, but it really isn't. So, all right. So I have I'm going to answer this last question here with Rama, and then we're going to wrap it up tonight. Really appreciate you guys jumping on and doing this. So, how many people we need on our list to have one person to invest? Is it 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 or 1 to 20? I think it depends on how good of a list you have, Rama, what the quality of your list is. Because I know of some people that just put anybody and everybody on their list, and so that's going to probably be like 1 out of 100. But I would probably, venture to say that depending on the quality of your list, it's probably going to be around 5%, 5% of your list, because everybody, whenever you have a deal, is not going to be ready to invest. So you need to make sure that you get that number. You need to have at least 100 people on your list to be able to raise any significant amount of money. But again, it depends on how you utilize that list. If all you do is send them an email and see if they'll invest, that percentage is going to be down around that 5% mark. But if you start to pick up the phone and start to call some of those people that you have a relationship with and talk to them about the deal that you have, I would venture to guess that that's going to be closer to like 10% or 15%, or maybe even higher, depending on the quality of your list. So, and then last question here with Jeff. How much should someone be getting paid if they raise money, and any tips for partnering to have some practice for fundraising? So, Jeff, we're going to be doing a webinar. Hopefully, maybe even this week, I'll do it on working with capital raising partners. And so I will address that question at that webinar. So stay tuned for that one. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of the webinar today. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to continue to provide you guys some more content and more valuable information. So if you have any questions in the future, feel free to shoot me over an email, dan@multifamilyinvestornation.com. Also look forward to meeting each one of you at various meetups that we'll be doing across the country, those cities that we mentioned earlier as well. So thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you on a future webinar.